We wish to acknowledge the presence of Councilor Gail Abunal Gomez, as well as City Councilor Attorney and welcome to the 127th commemoration of the martyrdom of the Quince Martires here at Plaza Quince Martires, City of Naga. City Councilor Lito De Lozario and the members of the Sangguniang Panlungsod and Police Colonel Nelson A. Pacalso, the City Director of the Naga City Police Office, will lead the flag raising ceremony to be facilitated by the Naga City Police Office with the unified troops. May we request everyone to please stand for our national anthem. Ladies and gentlemen, the Philippine National Anthem. The flag will now be lowered to half-staff in honor to commemorate the martyrdom of the Quince Martires. In behalf of our City Mayor, the Honorable Nelson S. Ligacion, our civilian host, Councilor Lito Del Rosario, and Police Colonel Nelson A. Pacalso of the Naga City Police Office will assist our city officials with the wreath-laying ceremony, together with the members of the Sangguniang Panlungsod as ceremony entourage. To carry the wreath and honor guards are officer and personnel of the Naga City Police Office as the Filipinas Kong Mahal is being played. That ends our wreath-laying ceremony. We will now proceed to the community flower offering. The first flower offering is from the Rotary Club of Naga. And to lead the offertory is the President of the Rotary Club of Naga, Mr. Jonathan Lau. We also wish to acknowledge the presence of our City Administrator, Mr. Elmer S. Baldemoro, as well as the School President of the Universidad de Santa Isabel, Dr. Teresita S.A. Abastillas, D.C. Next community flower offering is from the Naga City Masonic Lodge. Masonic Lodge 257. We wish to acknowledge the school president of the Naga Parochial School, Reverend Father Dario Echepare. Next community flower offering is from the Boy Scouts of the Philippines. And that ends our community flower offering. Once again, good morning everyone and welcome to the 127th commemoration of the martyrdom of Quince Martires. We gather here today to commemorate the heroism of the brave martyrs of Bicol. Their sacrifices echoes through the pages of history, reminding us the unwavering spirit that fuels the fight for justice and freedom. As we reflect on their courage, let us draw inspiration from their legacy and renew our commitment to the principles they valiantly defended. And to formally open our program, let's all hear the welcome message of the Committee Chairperson for Culture and the Arts, with the theme, Educational Initiatives Retelling the History of Quince Martires. Ladies and gentlemen, Councilor Joe Perez.
Sa satuya pong mga bisitang Ngonian, pahaga daw tabi kang guest list. Kadakol kaya dahil ko memoryado. Ano? Of course, sa sakuya pong pag-iriba sa Sanggunian, ang mga konsyales kan siyudad, yaon po si Ngonian, si Councilor Lito de Rosario, si Councilor Oying Rosales, si Councilor Omar Buenafe, si Councilor Gail Abonal Gomez, si Councilor Vidal Castillo, si Councilor Dodit Beltran, asin ang satuyang Youth Councilor, si Jeffson Felix, and of course ang satuyang City Administrator, Mr. Elmer Baldimoro. Yaon po ang satuyang mga opisyalis po kang Department of Education, asin kang mga pribado pong eskwelahan sa Universidad de Santa Isabel, yaon po si Sister Teresita Abastillas. And then sa Naga College Foundation, yaon po si Madam Aida Osea. Sa Naga Parochial School, yan po si Father Dario Ichipare. And nahiling ko man po si Principal ng Camarines Sur High School, si Mr. Alferez. Ang Boy Scouts of the Philippines na pigrepresentar po ni Mr. Frederick Baldosa. Ang Free and Accepted Masons of the Philippines. Asin sa iyang asin ang sa iyang mga opisyalis na pinamamayuhan po ni Mr. Philip Mark Olivan. Ang Free and Accepted Masons of the Philippines na sa panginginot man po ni Worshipful Master Arnold Ombao. Ang mga miyembros po kang Rotary Club of Naga. Ang mga personahes po, ang uniform personnel kang PNP, asin kang Bureau of Fire Department, kabali naman po ang Naga City District Jail, ang satuya po mga estudyante, narayaan po ngunyan, asin importante po ang sa indang presensya ngunyan na aga, mga opisyalis po kang DepEd, yan po si Superintendent. Di ko nahiling, yan kay sa likod, paparahanap ko pati sa lista. Si Superintendent Susan Coliano. And gabos sa gabos po. Sa gabos pong mga Bicolano, sa gabos pong mga Nagenyo. May maarabot pong mga bisita pa, yaon na daan, nagdadangadang ang satuyang local historian. Bakit lang po siyang local historian, national historian, and even international, si Professor Danny Herona. Okay. Good morning, everyone. And sa ngaran po kang satuyang alkalde, pinapaabot ko po ining mensahe na sinasakop ko naman po ang mensahe kan satuyang Vice Mayor bilang pamayo kang bilang presiding officer kang samuyang sanggunian. And I believe ini man pong i-deliver ko sentimento kan sakuyang pag-iriba po sa sangguniang panglunsod. Again, good morning. Iyan pong monumento sa atubangan Nyato na sinabi nga ni kan sarong national historian na garo sarong dakulang wedding cake was erected during the incumbency of the late Governor Julian Ocampo sometime in November 30, 1923. According to my friend, the late historian Jose Barameda Jr., the first commemoration of the 15 Bicol Martyrs took place on March 3, 1941. Ini po base sa lumang printed program na nakuha niya. Kan siya nagre-research, nagigibong research, manungod po sa Quince Martires. According to him, the event was witnessed by the people and the whole official dam of Naga, then the provincial capital of Camarines Sur. But official recognition of the 15 martyrs came only on February 20, 1950, when the director of the Department of Education added January 4, 1897 to the list of significant dates in Philippine history. Ngunyan, 127 years ago, iyon daw when Filipino freedom fighters from Bicol were executed. They were killed 5 days after Dr. Rizal, our national hero, was shot by firing squad in the same spot in Bagong Bayan, now called Luneta. The 4 others were either exiled, tortured, or died in prison. I wish to acknowledge my colleague, Councilor Buddy Del Castillo, my timekeeper. Sa session po, kaya pag-alaba ng speech ko sa kuyang privilege speech, araw ka na ako kayan. But because this is an official event, I warn you not to do that here. This monument is as iconic and as historic as many other important landmarks throughout the country. It was designed by Juan Crispolo Zamora and sculpted by Jose Barcena of Naga. Ang mga Barcena, yaong pupuo niyan, sinda mga residente sa barangay San Felipe. Ang saro sa mga hoven na descendant kan mga Barcena, as in namesake kang nagibo kay Iniyo. Iyo po, saro man pong hoven na sculptor. Upon instruction of then Mayor Jesse Robredo, I contacted the younger Jose Barcena, a great-grandson and known sculptor based in Metro Manila. He was designated to design the Oragon Monument along General Loomis Street across the Naga City Public Market. So we have 2 Barcenas erecting or designing 2 monuments in the city of Naga. It was completed in 2011 in time for the former mayor's last term. Unfortunately, the young Barcena is no longer around. He died while doing another monumental project in Mindanao a few years ago. I will not delve on the individual stories of the 15 martyrs, nor expound more on their martyrdom. I will leave that to our distinguished speakers, especially to our historian, my friend, Danilo M. Herona. He is a renowned historian and has earned the respect of his peers, both here and abroad. When writing the book From Epic to History, a brief introduction to Bicol history, published in 1988 by the Ateneo de Naga University, author Danny Herona complained about the dearth of materials needed to piece together Bicol's past. Many were written about the heroes in Cavite, in Pampanga, the Ilocos, Samar and the Visayas, and some parts in Mindanao, sa saindang pakipaglaban sa mga Kastila, but seldom, if at all, about Bicol. Danny needed to go to the museums and universities in Spain for archival materials so that he would come up with well-researched accounts of what was Bicol then and what would come up, and what was Bicol then and what significant events took place during the Spanish regime and what caused its fall. Professor Herona, as a result, wrote many books and is doing more about the various towns in Bicol since the Spanish colonial period, when Nueva Cáceres was the central point of Bicol's glorious past. The late Senator Raul S. Rocco, in a foreword to a book by Nagueña Evelyn Caldera Soriano, about Bicol revolutionaries Tomas and Lodovico Arejola, said that the Philippine history has to be rewritten to correct many accounts based on distorted views of our conquerors. He stated that the voices of Filipinos from other regions outside Katagalugan should also be heard and integrated into the national memory. He emphasized that Bicol history, on the other hand, has yet to be written because we have not yet fully accounted for the heroic acts of many brave Bicolanos who fought during the wars against Spain, against America, and the Japanese Imperial Army. The late Luis General Jr., I mean the father, noted that many stories, big or small, about persons or events, about Naga or Bicol, heroic or otherwise, trivial or not, were customarily being told and retold inside barbershops. Unfortunately, nobody took note or wrote about them. Soon they faded away and were eventually forgotten. Ganda na lamang si Barbero sa iyang mga istorya, kaibahan niya na duman sa iyang lulubgan. The elder Luising General was known to be a human rights lawyer and journalist, who is now our recent contemporary hero, since his name, along with that of another human rights lawyer and fellow Nagueño, the late J. Antonio Carpio, only about 2 months ago, was etched and installed in the barangay, in the Bantayog ng mga bayani in Quezon City. As tribute to those who died, were incarcerated, and risked their lives in defense of democracy and freedom during the dark days of martial law. This plaza, with its 15 martyrs, serves as eloquent symbol of the Bicolans' involvement in the revolutionary struggle against Spain. Several others died in the hands of the oppressors, who accused them of treasonous acts against the Spanish crown. This would remind every one of us of the movie, kung nahiling na po nindo, kung dapat dala nindo, ang pinapasalingon niya na gumborsa. There is a very strong similarities between Gumborsa and our 15 Bicol martyrs. There were many names, other names, including faceless ones, over 100 of them, and not just 15, that suffered and were executed or exiled to Africa, some of whom died while in transit, while others managed to come back and continue the fight. We have names such as Vicente Orsua, Tomas Valenciano, Severo Patrocinio, Esteban Villarreal, Francisco Alvarez, Jose Desiderio, Antonio Arejola, and his son Ludovico, among others. Mayo po sinda dyan, alagad dapat kabaliman kuta sinda, kundi garo dadakulaan takayan ang base kang monumento. As I said, this is a symbol of the many martyrs and heroes that come from our place who fought against the Spaniards. Not necessarily who fought against the Spaniards, some of them simply rooted for political reforms, for reform in their society at the time. Indeed, without dismissing the work of other Bicolano historians, as Rocco implored, we will need to rewrite about the history of Bicol, validate the stories with extensive research, and write more about them, so that more Bicolanos, more Nagueños, especially the youth and students, will have access to them and feel proud about their ancestors. I also challenge the local government units, Naga included, to assist our writers, our historians, promote and patronize their work, and help them be provided with funds and other logistics needed for their scholarly pursuits. On this note, I wish to recall, don't worry, madali na po ini. On this note, I wish to recall my high school days with Father James O'Brien, SJ, the Irish New Yorker, and eventually he was naturalized as Filipino, who was fondly referred to as more Bicolano than most Bicolanos. Aided by students, kabali ako, especially those coming from other towns and provinces he wanted to visit, the tall Bicol-speaking Jesuit traveled throughout Bicol, from Siroma to Masbate and Sorsogon, to encourage them to write about the history of their towns and their people. As a result, Ateneo de Naga in 1966 came up with a priceless book entitled The Historical and Cultural Heritage of the Bicol People. Igwa po akong kopya kayan, si original copy, mimeograph copy, which Father Obi himself edited and used in teaching Bicol culture. Bicol culture as a subject flourished in the Ateneo. Succeeding updated editions of the original were accordingly published. He called Bicol as an maugmang lugar and wanted the students to feel proud about its heritage. But the story did not end there. He brought the book to be taught at the Ateneo de Manila, where he was eventually transferred until he died due to failing health. I wish that this initiative and legacy by the good Jesuit be replicated in other classrooms in Bicol, public and private. We shall do this for the love of Bicol and its rich history, including the stories of our heroes and the 15 Bicol Martires. These stories should be cherished and ingrained in the hearts and minds of our youth, the future leaders of the land of our birth. Patriotism cannot be fully nourished or practiced without the significant knowledge and appreciation of our proud history and heritage. Mabuhay ang Bicolandia, mabuhay ang Pilipinas. Thank you.
Thank you very much, City Councilor Joe Perez, our committee chairperson for Culture and the Arts. And now to give us a message with the team Bicol's contribution towards Philippine independence. Ladies and gentlemen, the President of the Rotary Club of Naga, Mr. Jonathan Lao.
Good morning, everyone. Unya na aldaw po, ginigiramdam ta, an sa tuyang Quince Martires del Bicolandia. Sinda po nagsakripisyo kan sa indang buhay para sa maray na kamugtakan tangon yan. all of them were convicted without due process. Sabi nga po ni Councilor Joe Perez, 11 of the 15 were hung in Bagong Bayan just 5 days after Jose Rizal's execution. And 4 of them were either exiled, tortured, or thrown in jail, also without due process, and they later died. Ang sakripisyo po kang Quince Martires, as in ang kadakol pang ibang mga Bicolano na nagbuwis kan sa indang buhay para sa katalingkasan, iyo ang satuyang dakulang kontribusyon sa independensya kang Pilipinas. Pero sa ehemplo ninda, sa sakripisyo ninda, ano po ang masasabing pinakadakulang magiging kontribusyon ta bilang mga Bicolano? Ini po, sa Ngonian na panahon, mayong iba, kundi ang satuyang tultul na pagkabuhay. Sabi nga po ni Sec Jesse, matino at mahusay. Let us honor their sacrifices by living our lives well to protect our freedoms and independence. During their time, freedom meant liberation from foreign oppressors. We are reaping the fruits of their sacrifices to this day, and it is only proper that we look back and remind ourselves the value of this freedom. However, achieving true freedom goes beyond simply ridding ourselves of them, these foreign oppressors. Katong panahon pa po yan. At present, we encounter various threats that challenge our liberty, our sovereignty. Poverty, for example, continues to afflict our people. Divisions caused by politics, cultural, religious divisions, religious differences, they still persist. Corruption obstructs our nation's progress. And we also face the looming dangers of climate change and the after effects of the still ongoing COVID-19 pandemic. Sa satuyang Quince Martires, sana manudan ta ang prinsipyo kang dedikasyon. It is dedication that can free us from poverty, corruption. It will foster understanding and acceptance of our cultural and spiritual religious diversity, and enable us to collectively confront the difficulties posed by this looming climate change, and also help us rise above the pandemic. For close to a century, by the way, I'm representing the Rotary Club of Naga, so for close to a century, the Rotary Club of Naga has been committed to serving the community. The Rotary Club of Naga embodies this principle of dedication. As we continue to face these economic and cultural challenges, RC Naga stands alongside Nagueños and Bicolanos, supporting them every step of the way. So let us remain steadfast in our commitment. Let us continue to embody the spirit of generosity and compassion so that one day we may look back and recognize ourselves as the heroes that we are all striving to become. Ilang po yan, Diyos mabalos, and God bless us all.
Thank you very much, Mr. Jonathan Lau, the President of the Rotary Club of Naga. We also wish to acknowledge the barangay officials present. We have the barangay officials of Barangay Kararayan, headed by Punong Barangay Rodrigo Agravante, Barangay Liboton, headed by Punong Barangay Ronald Duntok, Barangay San Francisco, headed by Punong Barangay Efren Nepomuceno, Barangay Tabuco, headed by Punong Barangay Lisa Carmona, as well as the Barangay Bagong Bayan Sur, headed by Punong Barangay Pin Camba. We also have the SK Chairman of Barangay Liboton, the Honorable Don Valen Coralina. And now, ladies and gentlemen, let's all hear a song number from Miss Maria Paula Jean Guevara.
Dakilang lahi na sa'yo tangi, pag-ibig ko inang bayan. Isinumpa ko, o Pilipino, gagaling ang sugat ng iyong nang pahiran ko, luha ng iyong puso, at natayo muli ang karangalan mo. O ang pag-ibig ko sa'yo, inang bayan, ikaw ang siyang dalangin ko sa Diyos kailanpaman. Kuminang ng iyong bituin at sumikat ang araw, ang kalayaan mo'y sinisigaw. Ang bukas ay tanging sa'yo nakalaan. Kayo manggi ang kulay mo, dugo't pawis sinalay ko, di ka na maaapi. Ngayon o kailanman, pag-ibig ko sa'yo, inang bayan. Dakilang bayan, kapayapaan, iyong muling magagamtan. Tulad nung araw bago inagaw, ang iyong kayamanan, ang iyong kalayaan. Nang pahiran ko, luha ng iyong puso, natayo muli ang karangalan mo. O ang ngayon o kailanman, pag-ibig ko sa'yo inang bayan. Kahit na gaano kaliit ang tinig ko, buong lakas ako'y magtatanggol sa'yo. Pag-ibig ko sa'yo, inang
Thank you very much for that performance, Miss Paula Jane Guevara. We wish to acknowledge the presence of the General Manager of the Metro Naga Water District, Mr. Florencio T. Mongoso, as well as the City Hall department heads present this morning. Good morning po. And to our city youth officials headed by our City Youth Mayor, the Honorable Ellen Nicole Vergara. And now, to give us a message, let's all hear our Philippine historian with the team Quince Martires, a story of courage and sacrifice. Ladies and gentlemen, Professor Danilo Madrid Herona.
Diyos maray na alda po sa Indo Boss. Of course, my profound gratitude to Councilor Joe Perez, a friend of mine, and very, very well committed to expounding, studying, pursuing deeper and appreciation of our heritage and the history of Bicol. To the other distinguished members of the Sangguniang Panglunsod Naga, my respect to you. I don't have to identify individually because I might miss some of the names, and and with the limited time we have. To the members of the clergy, the church, I saw some of them, the religious orders who are here, the members of the Rotary Club, and the Masonic lodges in Naga City and the province, the members of the officials of the DepEd, probably some representatives of CHED, and from the local government administrations, the officials and staff of the City Government of Naga, and other distinguished guests right now. I remember one time what the great Renato Constantino once said. He wrote a certain essay, it's actually a book, it says, "Veneration without understanding." And I think this constitutes a problem for Filipinos because we might be producing fictions, not only about nationalism, but about our history. And precisely that's when I embark on my research. This is one of my, you might say, have in mind to rectify whatever errors we have embedded in our historical narrative. Of course, among the major works I did, which in a way corrected a major event in history, is when I wrote a book on Ferdinand Magellan. That was the first book ever written by a Filipino historian, a comprehensive one. And one of the major changes there is that we already changed the image of Lapu-Lapu from a young warrior to an old man. When I was doing research in the archives in Lisbon, a document there, a very cryptic narrative in the Portuguese language says he was muy velho. In Portuguese, muy velho is very old. He was not the young, typical Lapu-Lapu we know in our monuments, but he was an old man. And that's the reason why 3 years ago, the central bank issued a paper bill, a commemorative bill, 5,000 peso bill, which depicted Lapu-Lapu no longer the young warrior, but an old man. And probably one of the major changes that I have introduced in history. But of course, the more important, I think, issue in history is our local history, especially the Quince Martires, as Councilor Joe Perez has elaborated earlier on. That's the problems and the need to do further research on this. One thing that we know is that we know very little. What we know is we know very little about it. And that's why when I was doing my doctoral work in Spain, working for my research on my doctorate in history, one of the things that I examined in the archives, specifically in the so-called Archivo Histórico Nacional. You know, in Spain, the archives there are specialized. You wanted to do research on the galleon, you go to this archive. You want to do research on the ecclesiastical history of the Philippines, you go to this archive. You want to do research on the 19th century, you go to the Archivo Histórico Nacional. So everything about the records of Rizal, whether Rizal retracted, whether what happened on the trial of Rizal, it's contained in the Archivo Histórico Nacional, and also at the archives at the Archivo Histórico Militar in Segovia. And my interest is to work on the Quince Martires. And one of the documents I encountered, which I think is very, very significant, was a thick volume of the, what you might probably call a dossier of the Abella family. Very, very thick. One of the thickest compilation of documents on Filipinos, or what you might probably refer to as Indios in the late 19th century, was that dossier of Manuel Abella. And the dossier of Abella was very, very revealing because it was a compilation of the Spaniards from the time that the Abella changed their name from Santa Rosa to Abella as a result of the 1849 decree of Governor General Narciso Claveria. The decree of Claveria was commanding us Filipinos to change the names that we have adopted from saints to names that are more of a more secular character. The reason is not because Claveria is against the Catholic Church or against saints. No. In fact, what he was interested in is to avoid making fun of the religious names, because imagine if a certain person surnamed De Jesus committed a crime of murder or rape. So he would be burying the name, he would be embarrassing the name of Jesus Christ. So to avoid that, they would have to adopt a more secular name. And the Abella adopted the name Abella from Santa Rosa. Originally, they were Santa Rosa, but after 1849, they became Abella. And the Abella were not actually from Naga. They were not Bicolanos. They were from Tagalogs. So they migrated to Naga in 1864, and by 1897, he was one of the richest, not only Nagueño, not only Bicolano, but richest Filipino. And you will see that as we go along in my brief discussion. And I mention this because it has a bearing on why they were executed, why they were implicated in this so-called conspiracy or rebellion. Now, so first of all, we have to understand the complexity of the the historiography of nationalism. It's very easy to write history, but it's difficult to write a good and right history. Because you can gather a lot of information from ordinary people, all these things, and make a narrative out of that. But we are only duplicating, propagating mistakes and errors unless we really examine the right documents. And as I said, for me, the right documents will be the archival documents. What are the archival documents? Archival documents are those documents written officially and written contemporaneously with event. And that's why we generally go back to the records in Spain. And what happened here? One thing is, as I said, there were only two narratives about nationalism. You become a hero if you are killed by the colonizers, or you become a hero if you kill a colonizer. The case, for example, of Lapu-Lapu, Tamblot, and Bangkao, and others who revolted against Spain, we enshrine them as heroes because they killed colonizers. On the other hand, you become a hero also if you are killed by the colonizers, such as the case of Jose Rizal. But the issue is, why were you killed? Why were these people killed? This is the more complex issues in history, and therefore it requires thorough archival research. Now, for this particular instance, why were the Quince Martires killed? As rightly pointed out by Councilor Joe Perez, they were not actually 15. They were only 11. They were who faced the firing squad. Others died in exile. Others died here. For example, the Hernandez died here in Naga. But then there were more. There were actually probably virtually almost all major towns of Camarines, of Bicol, had their own heroes. They were actually arrested. Most of them, if not all of them, were prominent personalities of the respective towns. Libmanan, Goa, San Jose, Tigaon, Pili, including those in Catanduanes and Masbate. If you look at the records in Spain, you will be surprised that many Bicolanos were arrested, but only very few survived the records that we now have here. So why were they arrested and why were they killed? Let me go down to the timeline because you will understand why. On September 4, 1896, there was a crackdown of what you call the 13 Martires de Cavite. They were arrested. And on September 12, they were shot by firing squad at the Cavite shipyard. But what makes it interesting for us Bicolanos is the connection, the impact of that execution on these 15 Martires. One of those executed was Victoriano Luciano from Cavite. Luciano was the crucial missing link in our history of the 15 Martires, which for hundreds of years was hardly or was never even mentioned at all. Why? Luciano was actually a classmate of Tomas Prieto in UST in the course of pharmacy in 1889. If you are taking a course of pharmacy in a period where there was so much turbulence, especially rumors of revolution, you will be among those who would be immediate target of arrest. Why? Pharmacy in the 19th century was not simply studying medicines. Pharmacy was studying chemicals. And if you are a chemist or a pharmacist, you know how to make explosives and bullets. And therefore, you are a threat to the stability of the state. That was also true with Tomas Prieto, because they, as I said, they were classmates. The records in UST showed they were together in 1889. Now, what does that make of Prieto? Prieto became the first among those arrested in Naga. Almost 4 days after the 13 Martires were killed in Cavite. See the connection, the timeline. Now, after the arrest, Prieto, in September 20, made what the Spanish records referred to as declaración, a long testimony revealing a wide penumbra of conspiratorial movement in Bicol. So he divulged and confessed the names of tens or 20 or 30s Bicolanos. But if you look at the socio-economic identity of them, you'll be surprised. They were not the typical rebels that we know in Manila, such as those of the Katipuneros. They were the aristocrats. They were the elites of the region. Priests, abogadillos, as they called them, abogadillo at the time, were not actually professional lawyers. For example, Arejola, Ludovico Arejola was classified as an abogadillo. There are others, for example, there were still others. I would mention, but they were supposedly educated people who were not actually lawyers, but they were learned in law. There were doctors of medicine. Severo Patrocinio was a doctor of medicine. There were actually photographers. You might probably say, oh, a photographer is just an... No. In the 19th century, to be a photographer is to be somebody. Why? Photography has its own politics. It can preserve you for posterity through their photograph. And at the same time, it can project who you are by the way you pose, by the way you act, which is preserved throughout history. So, these are personalities who, if you examine them in the context of the 19th century, were certainly prominent personalities. Were they potential rebels? No way. If you look at the Abella, for example, as early as 1870s, he was a generous donor to the Peña Francia celebration. In fact, he was an official of the Cofradia, the Peña Francia. And the family was actually giving money here and there, especially to the church. No way, no stretch of imagination would ever tell you that their characters would suggest that they are capable of killing people. So, what happened? Why were they arrested? What is interesting is the reason for their arrest came from what they called denuncia reservada, a Spanish term which means a secret complaint. What is a denuncia reservada? You know, at the time when there were rumors of the revolution in Manila, if somebody says, this guy is keeping guns, then you become, because of the hysterical Spanish community here, you become an immediate target for their arrest. So what is the denuncia reservada? Unfortunately, the record did not elaborate on this, what was contained there. But it says that 2 Spaniards made this denuncia reservada. He complained of certain people, supposedly members of a revolutionary movement. Now, who could have tipped off the Spanish authorities and could have authored this denuncia reservada? As I said, 2 Spaniards, most probably. But, specifically, there was one Spanish family here in the province who was very, very influential and very, very rich. And the name of this family had become the byword of nationalists, not only in Bicol, but in the entire Philippines. In fact, one of these members of the family was a bitter enemy of Dr. Jose Rizal. The family was Fesed. The Fesed migrated to to Bicol sometime in the middle of the 19th century. Checking the records of the PSED, they were very, very educated. He was, in fact, I think one of them was a member of the Ateneo de Madrid. No, well, don't have any notion that Ateneo de Madrid was a school. It was an association of intellectuals in Spain. I generally passed by that building when I was staying in Spain. It was actually sort of a literary, historical, cultural group composed of the intellectuals of Europe, but mainly, of course, from Madrid. And Rizal was at one time a member of that. And if that is the case, he was very, very educated, very influential. And they migrated here, and some of the brothers some of the PSED brothers earned influential position in the colonial bureaucracy in the Bicol region. In fact, one of them, Jose, became governor of Ambos Camarines in 1866. He became governor of Albay, and the others became businessmen. Their influence in the province was felt by the fact that they owned 670 hectares of land in the Bula, Ocampo, Pili area. 670 hectares in the middle of the 19th century was something. They were actually engaged in, you might say, very, very high-level economic activities. They were exporting ilang-ilang to Europe. They were actually manufacturing oil from coconut. They were introducing industrial development in the Bicol region. But there was also another group, Manuel Abella, who was an Indio. Contrary to popular belief that the Abellas were Spaniards, that's not true. They were Indios like us. But why were they? But what happened to the Abella? The Abella apparently became the rallying point of Filipinos, Bicolanos' pride, because they have exceeded, they have transcended the limit assigned to them by the Spaniards. You cannot be better than we are. But the Abellas did that. Just to give you an idea as to how wealthy and influential Abella was, Abella, by 1897, was the business partner of the Sobel de Ayala. Sobel de Ayala. They have the monopoly of the shipping lines in the Philippine archipelago. Ships traveling from Manila to Masbate, Catanduanes, Albay were actually owned by Ayala and Abella. One record says that they owned 10,000 heads of cows, the largest ranch in the Philippines. Without going far, just in Naga City alone, they owned a house where the Naga Optical now stands in front of the Plaza Rizal. The amount of that house was 30,000 pesos. Rizal's house, just to give you a comparison, amount of the house of Rizal was only 10,000 pesos, more or less. So 30,000 pesos. Whereas the average house of wealthy families here in Naga was from 1,500, to 3,000 pesos. He owned 30,000 pesos. Aside from that, this was only one of his houses here in Naga. He owned about 6 houses in Naga, and houses in Iriga, houses in Alabanga, and houses everywhere in the province. That's how rich Abella was. And for that reason, he became the target of probably anger of some of the Spaniards. And so, they were arrested. Abella became the rallying point, as I said, of Filipino pride. Why? The 3 priests were close to Abella. The others who were arrested with him were close to Abella, including some Spaniards who were recorded in our history of the Quince Martires. Manuel Pardo and Manuel Pastor and Andres Garchitorena were Spaniards, yet they were arrested. And the reason for their arrest was quite interesting. Andres Garchitorena, the the descendants of this Garchiterena family, was actually a Basque, a businessman in tobacco, who also had a business in San Jose, in Partido. Very, very rich. He was arrested because he was supposed to be carrying a Noli Me Tangere, or the book of Rizal, in the ship, and therefore he was among those arrested. But aside from him, Manuel Pardo is quite interesting. Another Spaniard, very, very rich. He owned businesses in the late 19th century Naga. In fact, you might consider his business as one of the malls in Naga in the 19th century. This was located at where the E-Mall now stands. It eventually became the Alatco, but earlier during the Spanish era, this was the mall of Manuel Pardo. And Pardo, though Spaniard, was arrested. Why? Because he was associated with a governor, a Spanish governor, Crisostomo Gomez, who was supposed to be sympathetic to the Bicolanos. And the Spaniards did not like him because it is said that here is Manuel Pardo, who just came to Naga and became very, very rich because he gave Manuel Pardo the forest in Mount Isarog, which had been cleared by the workers of Milaor for him to plant and develop into a vast hacienda. And the rumor, quite interesting in history, it is said that they were boyfriends. The governor had this Manuel Pardo as his boyfriend. So he gave him a lot of properties. So, and for that reason, the Spanish community in Naga were making fun of them and making rumors about their supposed relationship. So, when the revolution broke out, the Spanish community had now a reason for them to have this guy that they hated most, Manuel Pardo, arrested. And so, despite the fact that he was a Spaniard, he was arrested. But, if you look at the records, they were all huddled to Manuel Abella. Because the Spaniards, this Pardo, Crisostomo Gomez, alienated by the peninsular community, had to seek refuge through the friendship of Manuel Abella, who was very influential as in the Indio community. And so, to finally end my short talk, it says here, just to give you an idea of how they implicated the PSED, here are some of the records. It says, Tomas Arejola, our very own Tomas Arejola, says, was the leading the remnants of the Asociación Hispano-Filipina in Madrid, identified those he considered responsible for the arrest in his article on March 10, 1900, in the Filipinas Anti-Europa. He says in Spanish, Los denunciantes fueron Pablo Pised, also known as Kiokyap. This was the guy whom Rizal hated most. Jose Maria Fillo and Vicente Olves. Ayudados efectivamente por el no menos celoso Don Ricardo Lacosta, gobernador civil entonces de aquella provincia. What does it say? It says that the denouncers were Pablo Pised, who was known in history as Kiokyap, Jose Maria Fillo, and Vicente Olves. They were assisted, they were helped by the zealous governor of the province, Ricardo Lacosta. Well, so this is one testimony that the blame was on the small Spanish family. Other Filipino patriots confirmed Arejola's suspicion against the Piseds. One such was Antonino Guevara. Guevara was a military leader after the collapse of the Spanish regime and stayed in Naga and therefore knew the family in Naga. And he says, Pablo Pised, the writer known as Kiokyap, former editor of La Política de España and Filipinas, a pro-prior paper published in Madrid that flattered and pawned upon the priors who paid well. He and his paper brought about the despair and ruin of good Filipinos. Ramon Pised, brother of Kiokyap, and Raimundo Pised of the family of Kiokyapism. These poor monsters and others of their ilk, servitors of the friars, reactionary and obscurantists, played a major role in the arrest and execution of the martyrs of the city of Nueva Cáceres. So there were others, but I would not elaborate them. Hopefully, I think it's high time that we released the book. I wrote a book more than 20 years ago, this entitled The Veil of Martyrs. And I think everything you wanted to know about the secrets of the Quince Martires would be contained in that book. But this does not actually eliminate or this should not diminish the integrity and our veneration to these Quince Martires. So, so parting words, let me just put it this way. Nationalism, even in its pure, sublime, and transcendental or abstract form, emanated from material causal forces. So, meaning to say, there are no heroes that are simply overwhelmed by spiritual or idealistic motives. They were certainly caused by certain material forces. Either they were aggrieved by a Spanish personality, or there were certain, you might say, selfish motivations in some respect. But then, deeply embedded in the peculiar historical and cultural setting of the locality. So, nationalism, even in its pure, sublime, and transcendental or abstract form, emanated from material causal forces. And that's the reason why historians are needed to examine these causal forces. While every region claimed of a nationalist cause as a motor for their insurrectionary actions, such nationalism was certainly forged by certain material but not necessarily selfish aspiration, or even selfish ones with altruistic coating. Research on similar issues, as Councilor Dio Perez has already called for, issues of nationalism demands more exhaustive effort to explore daring theoretical alternatives to be able to undertake more incisive critique of paradigm, if not to unmask the subtlety of discourse and transcend the naivete of traditional narratives. It was in this particular circumstance that the idea of anti-colonial resistance had to be re-examined within the context of a particular sociology of colonialism. Spanish colonial rule was circumscribed by a racist sociology which looked at the natives in perpetual bondage and subjection. Any attempt by the natives to transform such relation was considered by colonial authorities as an anomaly, a threat to the system. Mere pretension by the local elites to put themselves on equal footing with the colonial master constituted an affront to colonial pride and prestige, and thus regarded as a form of rebellion. This seems to be the contention of Father John Schumacher, the eminent Jesuit historian, who wrote, "Perhaps implied here is an unwillingness to accept a status inferior to Spaniards, something which would certainly have been enough to incur the enmity of a man like Fised. Such ingratitude consisted not so much in their refusal to lay down their lives for Spain, nor to give to the government their wealth, but in the refusal to remain inferior to any Spaniard. This sentiment of betrayal rang in the words of Fray Jose Serrano, a Franciscan parish priest of Libmanan in 1896, when he confronted Vicente Orsoa on the night of his arrest, called him traidor, was the word the friar angrily uttered after having been asked of his complicity in the revolution." Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Danny Herona, for your enlightening message that has deepened our understanding of the sacrifices made by the 15 martyrs. Your insights have added richness to this commemoration, reminding us of the enduring importance of their legacy. Once again, we would like to acknowledge ASDS Cecil Ferro of DepEd Naga, as well as our friends from the media, the Philippine Information Agency, the Naga City Hall Press Corps headed by Mr. Roy San Ramon. And now, to give a message in behalf of our City Mayor, the Honorable Nelson S. Ligacion, with the theme, Challenges and Triumphs, Naga's Journey Since the Martyrdom. Ladies and gentlemen, Councilor Lito Del Rosario.
Maray na aga po sa kabos. Maray na aga po. Pasalamat po kita sa magayon na panahon ngunyan na pagkaaga. Nakula pong kaugmahan mi na yaon kamo. Ngunyan na pagkaaga hindi po sa tuyang okasyon. Sa tuy pong panel of speakers, ki Professor Danny Herona. Sana magkaigwa po kitang mas dakol pang mga engagements, mga araw kani para mas maintindihan ta ang istorya kang Pilipinas, asin kang Bicol, asin lalo na po kang siyudad kang Naga. Kay Sir Jonathan, Councilor Joe Perez, sa mga yaon po sa mga barangay officials na yaon po ngunyan, members kang media, hali po sa DepEd Naga City, headed by Ma'am Susan Collano and Ma'am Cecil Ferro, mga Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, hali po sa tuya pong Universidad di Santa Isabel, sa pagi po ni Sister Teresita Abastillas. Hali po sa Naga College Foundation, si Dr. Aida P. Osea. Sa Naga Parochial School, Father Dario, salamat po kang presensya nindo. Sa Boy Scouts of the Philippines, Girl Scouts of the Philippines, sa Order of Demolay, Bureau of Jail Management and Penology, Philippine National Police, BGMP, and sa pong Philippine Bureau of Fire Protection, Naga City. I hope po na mayo po akong nalingawan sa tuyang gabos. Of course, sa ko'y po mga pagiriba, ang Rotary Club of Naga City, gabos po mga Rotary Club. Palakpakan na po sa tuyang mga pagiriba sa Rotary and sa Order of Demolay, as in sa mga mason na mga kaibanan tapo ngunyan na pagkaaga, ang mga aki, mga estudyante, mga pagiriba ko po sa Sangguniang Panlungsod, Attorney Oying Rosales, City Administrator Baldemoro, City Councilor General Omar Buenape, City Councilor Joe Perez, Ma'am Gail Abonal Gomez, City Councilor Vidal Castillo, Councilor Dodit Beltran, SK Federation President Jepson Felix, City Councilor Attorney CPA Badong Del Castillo, asin sa kabus po na yaon nigdi, ngunyan pong pagkaaga. Sa ngarap po ni Mayor Nelson Ligacion, natukahan po ako na mag-deliver kan sa iya pong speech sa pungunyan, and I am very, very privileged to deliver this important message. Let me extend my warmest greetings to each and everyone in this solemn gathering. Though I am not physically present, I join you today and all the Nagueños and Bicolanos in commemorating the great sacrifices and patriotism of our own 15 Bicolano martyrs 127 years ago. A heroism that significantly contributed in the attainment of our nation's independence, which we have been enjoying up to this day. Last December 30, we observed the 127th death anniversary of our national hero, Dr. Jose P. Rizal. Today, it is also the 127th death anniversary of our 15 Bicolano martyrs, who likewise courageously and selflessly faced death for their love of our country. As mentioned earlier, 11 of them were shot in a firing squad in that same Bagumbayan field where Rizal was executed 5 days earlier, while the 4 others were recorded to have died already either inside their prison cells or while in exile. Indeed, it is with such high price to pay that our freedom as a nation was handed down to us by our forefathers at the cost of their very own lives. Such great a sacrifice we wish to be cherished and valued as the foundation upon which we now build a better Philippines for the Filipinos, a quest for which they have chosen to lay down their very lives. Now, it is imperative for us, the Filipinos of today, to continue that quest for betterment. For my message today, it is about challenges and triumphs, Naga's journey since the martyrdom, wherein we are being invited to look back at our history as a city, along with all the struggles and victories that came with it. And in so doing, we are posed with a reflection, how are we achieving the ideals of a free and better nation for which our brave 15 Bicolano martyrs sacrificed their lives more than a century ago. As such, if there's any that we can do in honor of their nobility as martyrs, it is in living up to their aspirations of creating a better country for us Filipinos, despite the odds, a vision which I believe is the same goal that we've been looking at now, particularly here in our beloved city of Naga. We've been working hard towards this end, as what our former leaders who were here before us also did. And we have been seeing how Naga had risen and is continuously transforming into a more livable, economically dynamic city that it is now, despite the tribulations that we have encountered, particularly in the past years. At present, this growth and development continue to be evident in our bold and ambitious undertakings for the development of our local economy, the enhancement of our tourism industry, and the improvement of our social services through our infrastructure programs and projects, and which were all anchored towards our aim of seeing the Nagaños living a better life in a healthy city that is Naga. This has been our objective at the core of every action that we're taking. A vibrant city that is teeming with development, opportunities that are serving for the welfare of the people, edukasyon, trabaho, salud, negosyo, asin maray na pagbuhay para sa gabos. Incidentally, nahiling ko po kunyan sa tayo po mga department heads, asin mga kaibanan sa City Hall kang Naga, lalo na po ang sa moyang Metro Naga Water District General Manager, asin mga SK officials kan sa tayo pong syudad. It may still take us quite some time before we can finally see further the realizations of our aspirations. Nevertheless, with the same hope, selflessness, and perseverance displayed by our forefathers until the very end, we are also determined to hold on to these dreams of ours. Nakaya na po ini, kan mga nakaaging taon, sa hampang kan mga na-experiencean tang mga angat, asin napangganahan ta po ang mga ini. As we start anew this 2024, my co-public servants, workers, students, every Nagueño, let this be our martyrdom of today. Not maybe in the form of bloodshed, but in also firmly believing and refusing to give up that vision of a healthy city of Naga, ang maugmang lugar, even in the face of adversities. Not maybe in a physical death, but in dying to attain to our measure in spite of the limitations. With us championing always the spirit of collaboration and innovation, we are optimistic that we can always emerge triumphant and victorious as we continue Naga's journey towards a more sustainable development since the martyrdom of our beloved Quince Martires. Padagos po kita mag-iribanan, asin magtarabangan, sa pagrealisar kan sa tong dakulpang mga pangiturugan para sa siyudad kang Naga. Diyos mabalos po, and once again, Happy New Year po sa Tuya Gabos.
Thank you very much, Councilor Lito de Alosario. And now, to conclude our program, we will be having a group photo op po. First, our city officials. Our group photo will be by batch.